Hey everyone, and welcome back. My name is Sam.
And I'm Melissa.
I grew up in the FLDS Polygamous community that was run by Warren Jeffs. I moved out of that when I was 18 years old.
Yes, and today we have a special treat for you. A special treat for me too. We got from our awesome sister-in-law. She actually, when she left, her and Sam's brother left together so they could get married and start a beautiful family. And family training study guides. She actually lent me the booklet that was part of the female study. And if you've seen our other videos, the boys, did you guys have any classes on how to be a man in the FLDS polygamous group?
No.
No.
Well, we were taught how to work.
Yeah, they're taught how to work, but there were no official classes, and the girls had literally textbooks, family training study guides.
I didn't know these existed, honestly. I had never seen them before now, and I didn't know that they were even a thing. So
yeah,
this is new to me.
So she was kind enough to let me borrow it and kind of read it. And as you can see, there's a few things that caught my eye that I was like, oh my gosh, this is super shocking to me. Yeah. And I feel like I'm pretty well acquainted with FLDS stuff now at this point, even though I was not raised FLDS. I was raised LDS, and there's still things in here that I never would have thought of or have never heard before in my life.
It's pretty crazy. It's some of the things, not gonna lie, I'm a little shocked. Even though I grew up out there, hearing some of these things, I'm a little bit shocked by it. It's
hearing things that the girls
hearing some of the things that they were telling the women. This is how you need to live. This is how you need to do things. I didn't know they were telling them that. I mean, I knew to some extent because I saw how they acted, but not to this extent.
Yeah. So I wanted to go through and talk about just a few of the things. Don't worry, we're not going through all these in a single video. It would take a while, but there were some things that I wanted to highlight about what it takes to be a good FLDS polygamous wife.
According to the handbook.
According to the handbook, okay? And if you want to continue to hear more stuff about what it was like for Sam leaving polygamy and more about the FLDS religion, then please like and subscribe.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I am going to just start reading some of them, and then we can kind of just discuss. Sam hasn't read this yet, by the way. This is something while he was at work, I was going through reading in my spare time, while Mickey Mouse is in the background for my kids. And
now Melissa officially knows more about the FLDS than I do in this.
At least what's expected of the women.
As far as what's expected of the women, exactly.
I would do a better job as an FLDS woman than Sam would now at this point. So.
Since I'm not a woman, you're very right.
Yeah. And I even have a couple questions. So, like I said, I'll read through them and then we can kind of go. So, one thing that I thought kind of answered a question that a lot of people had just in general was number 11 of lesson 1 says, your preparation in your father's home is all important. Before you leave your father's home, love every mother, love every sister and brother. And a lot of people ask if they have relationships with the other mothers in the home and if all siblings are treated the same. Mm. And I know when we had Amanda Ray on our channel, she had mentioned that they live in separate homes, right? All the wives live separately, and she didn't really consider them her moms. But in the FLDS, it's very fundamental.
Just to clear up,
page 1.
Yeah, and just to be clear up, Amanda Ray is from a different community. She's from the Kingston group, not the FLDS. So that's why it was very different for her growing up.
Yes, if you haven't seen that video of us interviewing her, then go watch that. But I thought that was interesting that loving every mother was part of the instruction to begin with. Okay.
And that's true. I mean, that poor part I knew of, and that's very true. We were taught to respect and love all of the mothers in the home.
Yeah. Now, here we're going to start into the wife stuff. So, the Lord gives the best to those who leave the choice to Him. The Lord gives the best. So, what is that? You're going to get the best husband as long as you're okay with it being arranged, right?
Yep. So that's referring to the choice, referring to who you are to marry. So. Yeah, that's saying just leave it up to the Lord. You shouldn't be, concerned or looking at another man and wanting or thinking about possibly this is who you want to marry. Just forget about it. Leave it up to the Lord. He will make the decision. That I knew of.
And a lot of times too, just for clarification, because a lot of times they talk about is celestial law. The celestial law, when they're talking about that, means polygamous marriage.
Yeah.
Right. So. They'll say that a lot of times. So if you hear the word celestial law, they're talking about polygamous marriage. Yep. But it says, your great preparation for entering into the celestial law is learning how to always, italicized, keep sweet and love one another. Such a girl will have success in marriage. Babe, what does it mean to keep sweet?
Well, it depends on who you ask, I guess. But generally speaking, it just means to go with the flow. To no matter what is asked of you, keep sweet. Just do what you're told to do. Basically, follow the rules. Don't ask questions. Just do what you're supposed to do and be happy about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this one, I literally wrote a sticky and it says whole page, but I will read through some of them quickly as to what that kind of more of like what it means to keep sweet and like some of the things that are expected for girls in order to like be able to get married. Yeah. It says when a girl lets the bars down and lets a boy touch her, she throws away her eternal salvation.
Yikes.
So they're not harsh at all in this. If you let a boy touch you. Now, when they say touch, do they like literally mean like holding hands, or are they talking about like intimacy, or both?
I would say both. Nah, I would say intimacy. Because there were several people that I guess you could say got caught holding hands or even kissing, and they weren't kicked out of a community or anything like that. But just like so many people interpret the scriptures differently. There were probably some families that interpreted this as don't even touch hands or anything like that. But
we'll get to that later.
But as far as I know, that would be considered actually intimacy.
Okay, girls, you must give full, italicized again. You must give full obedience to your husband, for you belong to him as he obeys the prophet. So there's a lot in here that really talks about like belonging and like a lot of objectification. The prophet knows the hearts of men better than any woman. Trust him. Again, this is at the time that Warren just is the prophet, so this kind of makes me like a little bit. Yeah. When the prophet speaks, the words he speaks are permanent. Okay, so that goes along with like trusting them. If you want to be presented to a husband clean and pure, the glory of the man is the woman. The glory of the woman is her virginity or innocence. Okay. Now that quote is mentioned like in every other lesson in here, like over and over and over, that your glory comes from the woman and the woman's glory is her virginity and innocence. So
see, I mean, I haven't seen this book or read this book,
but does it sound familiar?
This doesn't surprise me at all, to be completely honest. I mean, this is something that just I wouldn't have been surprised to hear this. No, not at all. Nope. Yep.
And this kind of goes with the hands. Girls treat the boys like dangerous snakes. Boys treat the girls like dangerous snakes.
I heard that.
This means hands off.
Yep.
So I mean that goes along with what like earlier we were talking about. Like I think it sounds more than just intimacy. Like hands off. Like don't touch each other. Don't look at each other. Don't think about each other. Don't. Basically just completely just trust and Warren Jeffs.
Yep. No, it's true. And I mean, it was even to the extent of the boys and girls within the same family. We weren't really supposed to do things together as far as even playing, like playing games and things like that. We weren't really supposed to do much together because it was very much this way. Like you don't touch, especially if it's from other families.
Yeah, I remember actually seeing another one. I didn't mark it, but they did mention like boys are not allowed to go into girls' rooms, like even as a family, right? Or were you guys allowed to? Because it made it seem like it was even familial. Like, do not go in there unless like a parent is helping you something specific. So still, like even within a family, like try to keep the guys and the girls apart, which
very much so.
Teffy even said, right? Like she was around the age of all these brothers and wanted to be included, and then the girls were still told like, no, you're not really supposed to hang out with the boys.
And I don't know if maybe it was just because the kind of the way it was, but as boys we didn't really want our sisters to be around when we were playing and things, and maybe it's just because that's the way that it was kind of ingrained in our minds that they shouldn't be. But I don't know. Yeah, it was very, very separate. We weren't supposed to be doing much together. I mean, we would eat meals together and do some chores together and things like that, but and we'd even go on some family vacations together, so it wasn't like we couldn't even do anything
like mingle
together
with your siblings,
right? But it was, when the boys are out in the yard playing and doing that kind of stuff, it wasn't really the girls weren't really supposed to be that involved.
Gotcha. Now this one is one that
or vice versa. If the girls were playing, the boys,
Yeah. This one I kind of had a question about. It says, the prophet is through giving sealings to men who steal their wives. That kind of a man is death to you. What does it mean to steal your wife? Do you know?
Well, as far as I am, that's a good question. Listening to this and based off my experiences, I would think that would mean that if the man is trying to choose his own wife, they would consider that stealing because he shouldn't be choosing at all. That he should leave it to the Lord to choose who he should marry. So they would consider that stealing if he tries to find a wife. Because many years ago, before Warren Jeffs was the prophet, some men would find a woman and like this this woman, and they would go to the prophet or the leader and say, hey, this is who I would like to marry. Is that okay? And in some cases, the prophet okayed that and said, okay, yes, that'll be okay.
You had a brother that had that happen,
yep,
right?
I had a brother that happened, but it was frowned upon. When my brother did it, it was during Warren Jeffs' dad, Rulon Jeffs' leadership. So Rulon Jeffs was the prophet, and so things were already starting to get a little bit more strict like this. Yeah. And so I remember it was very frowned upon when he did that.
And this is in Warren Jeffs' time. Warren Jeffs is the prophet when this booklet comes out.
Yes.
So that makes sense. So, that kind of man is death to you. Just a little bit extreme there.
Well, I think what they're trying to say here, because this is written for the women.
Yeah.
Right? So I think what they're trying to say here is, hey, if a man comes up to you and tries to say, hey, I would really like to, have a relationship with you. I'd really like to have you as my wife at some point. I think this is their way of saying, stay away from those men because they should not be making any of the decisions because they're trying to steal you.
Steal you.
Yeah, that's what I would get out of that.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, and the perspective obviously makes like a huge difference. The last thing that I kind of wanted to touch on in here that obviously full obedience. You are the glory of the man. Your job is to just listen to whatever the prophet says and make sure that you don't have any say in the matter and that that's going to be the best for you. So I thought that it was so interesting that you're supposed to continue to follow the man, but then there was this page about what to do if the man wasn't really a good man. Are you ready?
This was not. She mentioned this a little bit. This is not what I expected to hear. So very interesting.
Yeah. I guess I did tell you about this one part. Yeah. He didn't read it, but I was telling him about it. Okay. Once married, you're now given a greater job than you've ever had before. As you get close to your husband, you will find that he has weaknesses. If you are not careful, this could cause you to lose confidence in God and priesthood. Okay. The fact that anybody could think that they're getting married and that your spouse isn't going to have weaknesses shows how naive they are going into it, because every single person in a regular relationship, the other person's weaknesses before you get married, right? Or you would hope. Most
or
people,
at least a lot of them. You would hope to know a lot of them, yes.
That you're going to know a lot of them and that you're going to accept those weaknesses beforehand. But it gets better. Your husband might do things different from what the prophet teaches. Keep his weaknesses quiet. Pray for him, for your faith is first in Heavenly Father. Keep his weaknesses quiet. So even if he's doing against what the prophet, I feel so bad for these girls because they're being told the prophet's first. Make sure you're only going with him. You're not going with a guy who wants you, but only following whatever Warren Jeffs wants. But if your husband doesn't follow the prophet, your job is
You can't do anything.
You can't do anything.
Just be quiet. And pray.
Keep sweet and pray. Yeah.
And pray. Yeah, that's all you're allowed to do.
If your husband does not seem to see his weaknesses, beware and do not go and try to set him in order, for that will not help.
So once again, do nothing.
So once again, do nothing, right? So it's if you see weaknesses, you can't even communicate in a regular relationship style, oh, hey honey, I saw that this was going on, are you okay? How can we... There's no communication, right? It just keeps sweet, basically.
I know I grew up out there, but this, I can't wrap my head around this, honestly. I was never married in the FLDS community, so maybe that's why it's so hard to understand this. But, man, that's tough. That would be so tough for the women. Three
more. The best thing is for you to just do right and pray for your husband to be inspired to teach you to do right. The most dangerous thing you could do in the lives of your family is to voice the weaknesses of your husband. That will turn them away from priesthood. Now, priesthood is considered, like everything. So not only...
It's considered the power, they consider that, they believe that all worthy men have the priesthood, and that is power from God to them to be able to guide their families, to be able to make decisions, and to, give them the power to work in God's name on earth. And so they assume that, if you go up there and you tell the man, hey, or if the wife goes to the husband and says, hey, this isn't right, you're doing something wrong, or whatever, that it's going to make him doubt himself, and that would what did it say, ruin his...
That will turn them away from priesthood.
Turn them away.
Which is a crazy thought either, that either person's like spiritual, eternal salvation, like that it's going to rely on like me telling you a weakness.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to understand what they mean by that. I wonder if they mean that it would cause him to doubt that he is worthy,
all-powerful,
or all powerful, or whatever the case may be. I guess.
Yeah, turn them away from priesthood.
That's the only thing I can think of.
Well, and it sounds so serious, right? Like this is so much responsibility for a woman to have on their shoulders. Let me read this last one, and then we can kind of wrap up. But if you turn your children to yourself. So this goes, so they said, then you'll turn them away from the priesthood. The next one is, if you turn your children to yourself and not your husband, you will lead your children to destruction.
Well, this is something that we were told all the time by my mother. She would always tell me to follow the example of father, be obedient to father, and father was the person to look up to and everything. So she followed that very strong. I mean, she had her moments where she would teach us, but it was always, this is what father would want.
Yeah.
So I saw that.
Yeah, and I just feel like, I'm like, man, when I was reading all of this, I'm like, it's so interesting that in the FLDS, the men hold all the power, right? It's very patriarchal, right?
That's what we were just told.
The men hold all the power, but so much of the responsibility for eternal salvation rests on the women. So it's their job to make sure that they are clean and pure and virgins. It's their job to make sure that if a guy comes and tries to steal them as a wife, meaning actually like seek after them instead of just going with whoever they're given, that they're going to be destroyed. And then if your husband has weaknesses, like if he's not following the prophet, you can't say anything. If you do, it's going to lead him away, which is going to ruin your whole family. And at the end, even if your husband's not following the prophet, and he has weaknesses that he's not willing to admit and you can't say anything about, and you try to take your children and say, no, do this, do what is right, what does it say? You'll lead your children to destruction.
Well, so... I
don't even know what to say.
For people that are not out there, I mean, this would make no sense. You would just laugh at this, right?
Yeah, or cry. I almost want to cry for them.
Yes, for them. But I mean, like, if you were told that you had to do this. That's what I mean. That's what I mean. So it's hard to wrap your head around, but they are taught their entire lives, because you say the only thing they're able to do is pray. They are taught their entire lives that no matter what happens on this earth, God is in control. And he knows what's best for you. He knows what's best for your husband. He will reveal if there is an issue. He will reveal that issue to the prophet at the time. And so they think in their minds that they are just so small, and God is in control, and the men are in control, and they're receiving revelation from God. So it doesn't really surprise me, based on what they're being taught, that all they should do is pray, because they're assuming, or they're being taught, that every prayer that they pray is being heard to God, and that's being communicated to the leaders of the church, and that everything is in the know.
Yeah.
It's not that they're just keeping quiet, they're talking to their Heavenly Father, and then that information is being, given to the leaders of the church to take care of it themselves.
Yeah, and I know this is a lot of information, and if you're like me, like, you hear it, and it's frustrating, and it's sad, and all these things, but also, one reason that I did want to share it was because a lot of times it's so easy to judge why women don't leave. It's so easy. So like bringing it all the way back, like it's one thing to be like, oh my gosh, this is crazy, which it is, but hopefully it can bring a little bit of insight into the fact that when you hear of women being abused out there, and feeling like they can't leave and they don't know why. These are the type of things that they're teaching the young girls from a very young age. They're learning that they should never question, that they should never, and even if they see things that are flat out wrong, like even if people that they see aren't following what even the prophet's saying, which we know that the prophet Warren Jeffs, is a pedophile. Like even if they aren't following that, in their minds, they still can't say anything. They have to keep sweet. They have to be completely subservient and obedient at all times. And when they're being taught that their entire lives, it's really no wonder that it's so hard for them to leave. And yeah,
well,
I don't know.
No, it's true. And maybe in some point in this book or other books, we have several. So we're excited to share all this stuff with you and kind of talk it out and discuss it. But I imagine in some of the other books, it will talk a little bit more about what happens to you if you choose to leave. Because that's another reason they're afraid to leave. Not only do they feel like they, are being, they're completely in control, or that they have no control over their life because they're told how to live their life and that other people are in charge of their life. Aside from that, they're taught, same as the man, that if we leave, we are putting ourselves on Satan's ground and just we become completely, monsters, I guess, is the best thing I can think of. Like you just become servants of the devil if you leave. And so to have, I was afraid. I was super afraid to ever leave. And when I reached the age of 18, I kind of stopped believing that it would be so bad. And I started getting to know people that weren't from out there. And I just started, my eyes were opened a little bit. But it's something that I would say probably everybody out there really fears, and especially the women that have been under someone's control their entire life, to then go out on their own and take matters into their own hands and things like that. It would just be so difficult.
It'd be terrifying. Mm-hmm. And they use such harsh language.
Oh yes.
Like destruction.
They don't buttercoat. What's the word? They don't sugarcoat.
We do like putting things in butter, though. It's not just as good as sugar, right?
Buttercoat, yes. They don't sugarcoat anything. Yeah, we do like our butter. But anyway, so they're very direct. They use very harsh language. This is the way it is, and that's that, and that's how they, I guess, a fear tactic they use to keep people keeping sweet.
Yes, and we're gonna do another video soon on what it takes to be a good mother as well, because there's a lot in this book about that. And it goes hand in hand that not only is it hard for women to leave on their own, but once they've become a mother, that all of the things are just put on the line even more. And like words about like destruction and all the responsibility that you have as a mother is like so great that I feel like once you're a mother out there, being able to leave would just be it would feel insurmountable. Well, honestly,
it's very hard for a mother to be able to take her children with her too. So that's a whole other thing.
That's a whole other thing. We won't get into in this video, but we'll do another video soon about what it takes to be a good mother out there as well, which is really interesting. But like I said, I know this video is kind of a little bit more of like a downer and frustration, but I guess the main thing I want to say is just to be kind and to try to understand where these people are coming from, and people who come from these type of really strict religious groups. And just understand
and for all for all of you listening, and I know that you're watching this and you've been so supportive to us, and so I know that you guys are just so awesome and great when it comes to loving others and doing what's right for others. So thank you so much for supporting us and supporting those that are moving out and in need. But yeah, just to continue on with that, I would say just always, try not to judge people unless you fully understand where they come from. It's hard sometimes to put ourselves in other people's shoes. I try to the very best I can, but sometimes you can't fully understand what someone is going through or what they're feeling unless you've been through that too. So
yeah, knowing a little bit of their history can help enlighten a little bit as to where they make those decisions. And so, yeah, we'll leave you with that tonight. For those of you who have not seen, we also just barely got an Instagram and trying to get on there a little bit more and be able to connect with all of you more. So if you please subscribe this video. Go and find us on Instagram at Growing Up in Polygamy, and we will talk to y'all soon.
We will talk to you soon. Happy holidays, everyone.